A mother from the Ozarks moves to New York City to live with her son and daughter-in-law. She soon realizes she's not welcome and begins to suffer silent humiliations within her own home. Even surrounded by lies, she resists with dignity and holds a secret that could change everything. When the truth comes to light, the son must choose between appearances and his true roots. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you are watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. The dawn in the Appalachian foothills had colors the city would never know. Mrs. Josephine Rivers observed for the last time the sunrise over her small homestead in Blue Creek. Her eyes, marked by time but still as vibrant as spring water, scanned every corner of the simple house where she had lived for over 50 years. The adobe walls, the wood-burning stove, the wooden bench on the porch, each object held a piece of her history. With hands calloused from farm work, Josephine packed a worn leather suitcase. Inside, besides a few clothes, she carried the herbs she cultivated in her backyard and the ingredients to make the hearty bean and pork belly stew with cracklings, the dish her son, Raphael, loved so much in his childhood. Does he still like it? She wondered, carefully closing the suitcase. It had been 6 years since Raphael last visited the foothills. The visits, once frequent, had become rarer as he climbed the ladder of success in New York City. Josephine didn't complain. She understood that the big city had a different rhythm, different demands. And she was proud of her son, the only fruit of her womb, who had achieved what she and her late husband Sebastian never could: to study, to become an engineer, to secure a good job. The decision to leave the foothills had not been easy. After she was left alone, the weight of loneliness and hardship grew. Her pension barely covered her medicines. Raphael insisted for 2 years until she agreed to move. "Mom, you can't stay alone in this end of the world. In New York City, you'll have every comfort. My wife Deborah is eager to meet you." Deborah. Josephine only knew her from photographs. A beautiful, elegant young woman, always impeccable in the images Raphael sent. A successful lawyer, daughter of a traditional New Yorker family. So different from her, a simple woman from the foothills who could barely write her own name. The bus departed at noon. From the window, Josephine silently bid farewell to the red earth, the small white houses, the people waving at the bus station. Mrs. Josie, as everyone called her, was beloved in the community. Midwife, folk healer, counselor. Her home had always been open to anyone who needed help or a word of comfort. The journey was long, 22 hours on the road, with stops in towns Josephine had never heard of. As the bus advanced eastward, the landscape changed. The dry foothills gave way to larger cities, busier roads, until the first signs of the metropolis began to appear. New York City was exactly as she imagined, a world of concrete, buildings that seemed to touch the sky, cars in quantities she could never count. The Port Authority bus terminal startled her with its immensity. So many people, so much noise. She clutched her suitcase to her chest, as if seeking protection. That's when she saw Raphael. He looked different, shorter hair, clothes that looked expensive, a gold watch on his wrist. But his smile was the same as when he was a boy. "Mom!" He hugged her tightly. Josephine smelled expensive perfume, mixed with something familiar that only a mother recognizes. "How was the trip? Are you well? Let me take your suitcase." Raphael's car was large and gleaming. Josephine sat in the leather seat, feeling out of place. She watched the city through the window as her son talked about the traffic, about the neighborhood where he lived, about how happy he was to finally have her in New York City. "Deborah is eager to meet you. She prepared the guest room with great care." Josephine merely smiled and nodded. Deep down, she felt a tightness in her chest. She was leaving behind everything she knew, everything she was, to live in a world that was not her own. The car entered a complex of tall, elegant buildings. A uniformed doorman greeted Raphael with deference. The elevator was mirrored and ascended smoothly to the 10th floor. Josephine looked at her own reflection, a short woman with grey hair tied in a bun, simple, worn clothes. She felt ashamed. The apartment door opened. The place was spacious, decorated with furniture that looked straight out of magazines. Abstract paintings on the walls, vases with plants that looked plastic, they were so perfect. an aseptic world without history, without soul. And then she appeared. Deborah was even more beautiful in person. Tall, thin, perfectly styled brown hair. She wore a silk blouse and tight pants, her feet in high heels that made a characteristic sound on the marble floor. "So this is the famous Mrs. Josephine." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her voice was controlled, polite, but cold like the breeze coming through the panoramic windows. "Welcome to our home." Josephine felt something strange in that greeting, a distance, a silent evaluation. Deborah's hands, soft and with perfectly painted nails, barely touched hers, calloused and marked by time. "Thank you, my dear. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Raphael, show your mother to her room. She must be tired from the trip. Dinner will be served at 8. Deborah turned her back and walked towards what appeared to be a kitchen. Service? Josephine didn't understand. Was she the one who would prepare the food? The room was small, compared to the rest of the house, but more luxurious than any place Josephine had ever slept. A double bed with white sheets, a wardrobe too large for her few clothes, a window overlooking other equally tall buildings. "Do you like it, Mum? Deborah decorated everything especially for you." Josephine nodded, unable to express the discomfort she felt. That was not a space for her. It didn't have her scent, her essence. "It's very beautiful, my son. You live well here." Raphael smiled, proud. "It's what I always dreamed of, Mum. To give you comfort, a better life than we had back in Blue Creek. Tomorrow I'll show you the city, take you to the mall." Josephine smiled, hiding her apprehension. What would she do in a mall? What would she understand of this world of appearances? When Raphael left, she opened her suitcase and took out a small bundle, an old photograph of Sebastian, her husband. She placed it on the nightstand. Then she took out the herbs she had brought, hot peppers, wild rosemary, basil. She wanted to prepare the stew for Raphael, to reclaim a bit of the past, to show her love in the only way she knew how. As she arranged her things, she heard voices in the hallway. Raphael and Deborah were talking in low tones, but the words reached her. "I can't believe your mother brought those things. It smells of poverty, Raphael." Deborah's voice was sharp. "And did you see her clothes? We'll have to buy her new things. I don't want the neighbors to think we have a maid living with us. She's from the country, Deborah. Give her time." "Time? And how long will she stay? You said it would be temporary. Let's see how things go, okay? She's my mother." Josephine closed her eyes, feeling the first pang of pain. She didn't want to be a burden, a source of shame. Perhaps she had made a mistake by leaving her land. But now she was here, and she needed to find strength to face whatever came. At dinner, she sat at the perfectly set table. The food was strange, something Deborah called risotto. Josephine ate in silence, watching her daughter-in-law command the conversation, talking about people she didn't know, places she would never visit, using words she didn't understand. Raphael tried to include her, asking about the trip, about the people of Blue Creek. She answered with short phrases, noticing Deborah's impatient glances. When she finally retired to her room, Josephine knelt beside the bed, as she had done every night for over 70 years. "My God," she whispered, "give me strength not to be a burden, and help my son to see beyond appearances." Outside, the city never slept. Lights, honking, the constant murmur of the metropolis, so different from the silence of the foothills where the stars shone without competing with anything. Josephine closed her eyes, exhausted. Her heart belonged to the red earth of Appalachia, but her place was now beside her son, and for him, she would face any challenge. Even Deborah's icy gaze, which she already perceived to be just the tip of an iceberg of rejection. The first rays of sun were already invading the apartment when Josephine woke up. In the foothills, she would have been up for hours, feeding the chickens, sweeping the yard, lighting the wood-burning stove. Here, in that world of glass and concrete, she felt useless. She got up slowly, put on the newest dress she had brought, a Christmas present Raphael had sent 2 years earlier, and arranged her hair in her usual bun. She wanted to be presentable when she met her daughter-in-law. The apartment was silent. In the kitchen, she found a note written in elegant handwriting. "Raphael left early for work. I'll be back at noon. There's coffee in the machine. Do not touch the cabinets." Josephine looked at the machine, a complicated device with buttons and lights. She didn't dare touch it. She preferred to get a glass of water and sit at the table, watching the city through the window. Below, people looked like ants, always in a hurry. What a strange world. She decided to explore the apartment. The living room was impersonal, like a magazine photo. No family photos, no objects that told stories. In the hallway there were 3 doors. Her room, what appeared to be the master bedroom, and another closed door. On impulse, she turned the doorknob of the latter. It was an office, with a dark wood desk, books organized by color on the shelves, a computer. On the wall, framed diplomas with Deborah's name and a photo of her next to men in suits. That's when she noticed, on the desk, a folder with the name Raphael Will. Curiosity got the better of her. Inside, documents with complicated legal terms, but which she understood enough. Raphael had put a significant part of his assets in Deborah's name. "What are you doing here?" The sharp voice made Josephine turn around, startled. Deborah was at the door, her eyes flashing with anger. "Sorry, my dear, I was just getting to know the house. This office is private. I don't want you touching my documents." Deborah snatched the folder from her hands. "And don't call me dear. I'm not your daughter." Josephine lowered her eyes. "Forgive me. By the way, since we're talking," Deborah crossed her arms, her posture impeccable in her skirt and blazer set. "We need to establish some rules for living together. This is my house, understand? I worked hard to have this space and I won't allow it to be disfigured." "Of course, Deborah. I understand." "Good. First, don't touch my things. Second, don't invite anyone here. Third, keep your things in your room. Those herbs you brought, keep them away from my kitchen. The smell is unbearable." Each word was a small stab. Josephine merely nodded, swallowing the humiliation. "And please, don't wear those clothes when we have visitors. I have a reputation to uphold. Raphael left money for us to buy something more suitable for you." When Deborah finally left, Josephine felt her legs weaken. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. What had she done to deserve such contempt? Who was this woman her son had chosen? But there was no time for self-pity. Josephine was a woman of action, of struggle. She had not bowed before droughts, before the hardships of the foothills, and it would not be a snobbish daughter-in-law who would defeat her. She decided to prepare something special for Raphael. Ignoring Deborah's rules, she went to the kitchen and began to explore the cabinets. Everything was too organized, too aseptic. She found ingredients she had never used: imported olive oil, elegant jars of spices, pans that seemed never to have been used. With determination, she began to prepare the hearty bean stew with cracklings. She had brought the beans from Blue Creek, some essential herbs. She needed to improvise with the rest, but her hands knew what to do. As she cooked, she hummed old foothills songs, feeling for a moment at home. The aroma filled the apartment. Josephine smiled, imagining Raphael's reaction. She wanted to show her worth, her way of love. At noon, she heard the door open. It wasn't Raphael, but Deborah, who stormed into the kitchen. "What's that smell? What are you doing?" Her gaze swept over the counter, where ingredients were scattered, the pot on the stove bubbling. "I told you not to touch my kitchen." "I prepared Raphael's favorite dish. I wanted to make a surprise." Deborah's face twisted into an expression of disgust. She approached the stove, looked into the pot, and with a quick and cruel gesture turned off the heat. "This looks like pig slop. Do you really think Raphael eats this poor people's food? He's an executive now. He frequents the best restaurants in New York City." Without waiting for an answer, Deborah picked up the pot and dumped all its contents into the trash. The stew, which Josephine had prepared with so much care, drained away like a destroyed dream. "Please clean up this mess, and I don't want to see you cooking without my permission again." Josephine remained motionless, looking at the wasted food. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just nodded, silently. That night, when Raphael arrived, Deborah had already prepared a story. Sitting at the table with dinner ordered from a Japanese restaurant, she smiled sweetly at her husband. "Honey, I need to tell you something worrying. Your mother had an episode today." Raphael frowned. "What do you mean, an episode?" "She went into my office without permission, messing with documents. When I arrived, she seemed confused, disoriented, and then she started making some strange food, saying it was for you, but she didn't remember that you haven't eaten beans since you were a teenager. Josephine, sitting in silence, looked at her daughter-in-law in surprise. What kind of lie was that? Raphael loved the stew, always asked for it on the phone when she came to visit. "Mom, is this true?" Raphael asked, concerned. Before she could answer, Deborah continued. "Darling, it's normal. Your mother is already elderly. She lived isolated in the foothills. It's understandable that she has memory lapses, confusions. I didn't have any lapse, my son. I just wanted to prepare something special for you." "See? She doesn't even remember going into the office." Deborah sighed, feigning concern. "Perhaps we need to take her to a geriatrician. My Uncle Augustus is a specialist. We can schedule an appointment." Raphael seemed genuinely concerned. He looked at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. Fragile, aged, potentially confused. "Are you feeling well, Mom? Have you felt dizzy, forgetful?" Josephine felt the trap. If she denied it, she would be seen as someone who didn't recognize her own problems. If she admitted it, she would confirm Deborah's insinuations. "I'm just adapting, my son. Everything is very different here." Of course. We'll give it time." Raphael smiled, trying to reassure her, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. In the following days, Deborah continued her silent campaign. Small comments, subtle, but devastating. "Raphael, did you see where I put my keys? Your mother took them yesterday and doesn't remember where she put them." "Honey, I had to throw away that vase in the living room. Your mother filled it with water, thinking it was for plants. It was a decorative piece, remember? I left a message for your mother about dinner, but she insists she never saw the paper. It's worrying." Each small lie was a stone in the construction of a great deception. Raphael, busy with work, absorbed this information without questioning it. He began to look at his mother with a mixture of concern and pity, exactly what Deborah wanted. Josephine perceived everything. She was not naive, despite being simple. She understood that she was a victim of calculated manipulation, but how to prove it, how to contradict someone so skilled at weaving lies. One afternoon, while alone in the apartment, she decided to act. She went to the couple's bedroom and looked for something, anything that could give strength to her word against Deborah's. Under the mattress, she found a small notebook, a diary. The pages revealed Deborah's true face, notes on how to convince Raphael to transfer more assets to her name, complaints about the backwoods mother-in-law who was ruining her plans, even mentions of a man named Bruno with whom she seemed to maintain a parallel relationship. Josephine put the diary back where she found it. She wouldn't use it yet. It would be her ace in the hole, should things get worse. That night, she tried to talk to her son. Sitting on the balcony, while Deborah was taking a bath, Josephine held Raphael's hand. "My son, I need you to trust me. I'm not confused, nor am I losing my memory. Your wife—" "Mom," Raphael interrupted her, "you don't need to be defensive. I understand it's hard to accept some changes with age. Deborah just wants to help." "But Raphael, she's making things up. I never—" At that moment, Deborah entered the balcony, wrapped in a silk robe, her wet hair framing her face. She smiled sweetly. "Talking about me. I hope it's good things." The moment was lost. Raphael smiled at his wife, enchanted as he had always been since he met her. Josephine acknowledged the momentary defeat. She would need to be smarter, more patient. That night, in her room, Josephine wrote a letter to her son. She recounted the incidents, Deborah's lies, her love and concern. It was a sincere, painful letter. She hid it inside the Bible she had brought from Blue Creek. One day, when the time was right, he would read it. The silent war was just beginning. On one side, a sophisticated, manipulative woman, willing to do anything to maintain her lifestyle and control. On the other, a simple old woman, but with the wisdom and resilience forged in the hardships of the foothills. And in the middle, a man blinded by love and appearances, unable to see the truth unfolding under his own roof. In the darkness of the room, Josephine looked at Sebastian's photo. "Give me strength, my old man. Our fight continues through our son." 3 weeks had passed since Josephine's arrival in New York City. The New York autumn brought a cold she had never experienced in the Appalachian foothills, a cold that seemed to penetrate not only the body, but the soul. Each day she felt more isolated, more distant from her son, more invisible in that house of appearances. Deborah systematically intensified her campaign. With the skill of an experienced lawyer, she built a case against her mother-in-law, gathering small incidents, distorting facts, creating a narrative where Josephine appeared as a confused elderly woman, potentially dangerous to herself. One Saturday morning, while Raphael worked on his laptop in the living room, Deborah approached with a cup of coffee and a worried expression. "Honey, something disturbing happened early today." Raphael looked up from the screen. "What?" "I woke up at 5 in the morning to a strange smell. When I went to check, your mother was in the kitchen, all the stove burners on, no pots." Deborah lowered her voice, as if sharing a painful secret. She was standing there, staring at the fire, murmuring something about purifying the house. The lie was so absurd that Josephine, who had silently entered the room at that moment, almost lost her balance. She had been in her room all morning, praying the rosary as she did every Saturday. "Mom, is this true?" Raphael asked, his brow furrowed in concern. Before Josephine could deny it, Deborah continued. "See how confused she looks? I'm sure she doesn't even remember, poor woman." The false compassion in her voice was nauseating. "I never did that, my son. I was in my room all morning." "Mrs. Josephine, I understand it's hard to admit. These lapses are common at your age." Deborah smiled sweetly, her hand touching Raphael's arm. "I called my Uncle Augustus. He can see her at the geriatric clinic on Monday." Josephine felt her blood boil. That was beyond the limits of what she could endure. "I don't need any doctor. What I need is respect in this house." Her firm tone surprised both Raphael and Deborah. For an instant, her daughter-in-law's mask fell, revealing irritation. She quickly recomposed herself, however, adopting a condescending expression. "See, honey, aggressiveness, denial, these are classic symptoms." Raphael seemed genuinely torn. He looked from his wife to his mother, unsure who to believe. Finally, he sighed. "Mum, it would be good to have a general checkup. It costs nothing." Josephine understood that arguing would be useless. She nodded in silence, but her eyes conveyed a clear message to Deborah. She would not be easily defeated. After lunch, Raphael had to leave for an emergency meeting. As soon as the door closed, Deborah abandoned her mask of concern. "Let's be direct, Mrs. Josephine." She sat on the sofa, crossing her legs elegantly. "You don't belong here. You never will. The sooner you understand that and go back to your hole in the foothills, the better for everyone." "Why do you hate me so much, Deborah? What have I done to you?" Deborah let out a cold laugh. "Hate? That would imply you have some importance to me. I just don't want an ignorant country bumpkin ruining everything I've built. This apartment, social position, respect. It took me years to mold Raphael into the man he is today. Successful, sophisticated, connected to the right people. My son has always been a good, hard-working man. It wasn't you who molded him, that simple country boy who came out of the foothills. Please." Deborah rolled her eyes. "I transformed him. I introduced him to the right people, taught him how to dress, how to behave. Without me, he would still be some random construction engineer." Josephine stood firm. Decades of adversity in the foothills had forged an inner strength that Deborah, with all her veneer of sophistication, would never understand. "Raphael is my flesh and blood. Nothing you say or do will change that." "Blood?" Deborah stood up, approaching dangerously. "Money is thicker than blood, Mrs. Josephine, and guess who controls the finances of this house?" At that moment, Deborah's cell phone rang. She answered quickly, her tone changing to sweet and professional. It was an important client. Before going to the office, she cast a last look at Josephine. "We have a doctor's appointment on Monday. I suggest you cooperate, or things could get unpleasant." When she found herself alone, Josephine went to her room and took the letter she had written for Raphael from the Bible. She needed to deliver it, to make her son see the truth. But how to ensure he would read it without Deborah's interference? That's when she had an idea. Mrs. Alice, the housekeeper who came on Mondays, seemed like a good person. Perhaps she could help. The next morning, Sunday, Raphael suggested a walk in Central Park. Deborah refused to go, claiming accumulated work. It was a rare opportunity for Josephine to be alone with her son. Walking along the tree-lined paths of the park, Josephine felt momentarily at peace. The green of the trees, the cleaner air, the families around, everything reminded her a little of the simplicity of the life she had left behind. "Son, I need to tell you something important." Raphael smiled, gently holding his mother's arm. "Of course, Mum. Go ahead." Josephine took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I'm not getting confused, nor am I losing my memory. Your wife is making up these stories." Raphael's smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of discomfort. "Mom, please, don't start that. It's the truth, my son. She wants to keep me away from you. She wants to make me seem crazy." "Why would she do that? Deborah only wants what's best for you. She was the one who insisted that you come live with us." "Was it really? Or was it you who insisted, and she just agreed to please you?" The question seemed to hit Raphael like a punch. For an instant, a flicker of doubt crossed his eyes, but it was soon replaced by an expression of disappointment. "You're getting paranoid. That's not healthy. Raphael, please listen to me." "Enough, Mom." His voice came out louder than he intended, attracting curious glances from other park visitors. More controlled, he continued. "Tomorrow we'll go to the doctor. We'll let a professional assess the situation." The rest of the walk passed in awkward silence. Back at the apartment, Deborah awaited them with a triumphant smile, as if she knew exactly what had happened. That night, Josephine barely slept. She knew that the next day's appointment was a trap. Deborah had certainly already instructed her uncle on what to diagnose. She felt cornered, with no way out. That's when she heard a noise coming from the living room. She cautiously got up and opened a crack in the door. Deborah was on the phone, speaking in a low voice. "Yes, Bruno, I've already arranged everything. The medical report will confirm that she has early onset dementia. Raphael will have no choice but to admit her to a clinic." A pause followed by a suppressed laugh. "Of course it's a lie, you silly. The old woman is lucid. She's just an ignorant country bumpkin. But no one will believe her against the word of the renowned Dr. Augustus Meade." Josephine felt her heart race. Her suspicions were confirmed, and worse, Deborah planned to institutionalize her. She closed the door silently and returned to bed, her mind racing. She needed to act fast. The next morning, Mrs. Alice arrived early for the weekly cleaning. Josephine took advantage of a moment alone with her in the kitchen. "Alice, I need your help. It's very important." The housekeeper, a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes, nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Josephine. What can I do?" Josephine handed her the letter, along with some bills she had kept hidden. "I need you to give this to my son, but only when he is alone. It's about his wife. She's not who he thinks she is." Alice hesitated, the envelope in her hands. "Mrs. Josephine, I don't want to get into trouble. I need this job. Please, it's a matter of life or ruin. She wants to admit me to a clinic, to separate me from my son." Josephine's voice trembled. "I'm afraid of what might happen to me." Something in the old woman's gaze touched Alice deeply. She put the envelope in her bag. "I'll try, but I can't promise anything." At 10 o'clock, Raphael, Josephine, and Deborah entered the office of Dr. Augustus Meade, a man in his 50s with grey hair and a stern expression. Deborah greeted him with familiar kisses as she introduced her husband and mother-in-law. "So this is the patient." Dr. Augustus examined Josephine over his glasses. Without properly greeting her, he began to ask basic questions: name, age, date of birth. Josephine answered everything clearly. She spoke about her life in the foothills, about the property she had managed alone after her husband's passing, about the medicinal herbs she knew, demonstrating impeccable lucidity and memory. The doctor seemed slightly disconcerted, but Deborah constantly intervened. "Uncle, tell him about that stove incident I mentioned." "Ah, yes." He adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Josephine, your daughter-in-law reported worrying behaviors, turning on the stove for no reason, forgetting recent conversations, confusing names." "That's a lie." Josephine looked directly at Raphael. "Your son knows it's a lie." Raphael seemed genuinely distressed, looking from his mother to his wife, from the doctor to his own restless hands. "See? Aggressiveness, denial." Dr. Augustus made notes. "Classic symptoms of frontotemporal dementia." "Dementia?" Raphael paled. "Doctor, are you sure? My mother has always been so lucid." "Symptoms can appear suddenly after great stress, such as a change of environment. Fortunately, we have excellent specialized clinics that can offer—" "I'm not going to any clinic." Josephine stood up, indignant. "Raphael, my son." Will you allow this? Will they treat me like a madwoman based on her lies? Deborah assumed her most concerned expression, holding her husband's hand. See how agitated she is? It's for her own good, honey. We can't take proper care of her at home. Raphael seemed like a man torn in two. Years of respect and love for his mother confronted months of subtle manipulation from his wife. Doctor, can't we try medication first? See how she responds? Dr. Augustus cast a quick glance at Deborah, who made an almost imperceptible gesture of negation. In these cases, a controlled environment is essential. I suggest hospitalization for observation for a few weeks, then we re-evaluate. Leaving the office, Josephine felt like a cornered animal. In the car, the silence was heavy, interrupted only by the occasional sound of messages on Deborah's cell phone, probably from Bruno, the lover, Josephine thought bitterly. Back at the apartment, Raphael announced that he needed to return to the office to resolve pending issues. In reality, Josephine perceived, he was fleeing the situation, unable to face the difficult choice that presented itself. As soon as they were alone, Deborah dropped her pretenses. There, in 3 days the ambulance will come to pick you up for St. Gertrude's Clinic. I've arranged everything with my uncle. Why do you hate me so much? Josephine asked, her voice firm despite the fear she felt. Deborah approached, her eyes cold as the New York winter. Because you represent everything I despised in my life. Simplicity, poverty, naivety. I grew up in a bankrupt family, you know. My father was a drunkard who lost everything. I swore I would never again be in need. Her face twisted into an expression of disgust. And I won't let an old country bumpkin ruin my perfect life. At that instant, the phone rang. It was Raphael asking to speak to his mother. Mom, I need you to pack a suitcase. I'll be there to pick you up in half an hour. Josephine's heart froze. Could it be that her son was already taking her to the clinic? Where are we going, my son? Trust me. Just pack your things, the most important ones. The call ended abruptly. Deborah, who had tried to overhear the conversation, asked with false sweetness, what did Raphael want? He told me to pack a suitcase, that he's coming to pick me up. The triumphant smile on Deborah's face was devastating. Ah, so he's already decided. Excellent. I didn't even have to insist much. Go, pack your things for the clinic. Josephine walked to her room with heavy steps. Silent tears streamed down her wrinkled face. She felt betrayed, abandoned by the son she had loved unconditionally her whole life. As she folded her few clothes, Sebastian's photo seemed to stare at her with sadness. What do I do now, my old man? She murmured to the image of her deceased husband. When she finished packing her suitcase, she sat on the edge of the bed and waited, her hands trembling in her lap, her heart heavy as lead. Time dragged on, each minute a small agony. Finally, she heard the apartment door open. Altered voices came from the living room. Raphael and Deborah arguing. She couldn't distinguish the words, only the increasingly hostile tone. Suddenly, the bedroom door opened. Raphael was there, his face distraught but determined. Come on, Mom. We're leaving. To the clinic? Josephine asked, her voice small and defeated. No. Raphael picked up her suitcase, his eyes moist with contained emotion. Home, my real home. Raphael's car glided through the streets of New York City in silence. Josephine looked out the window, confused and apprehensive, observing the city she had never truly come to know. Beside her, her son kept his eyes fixed on the road, his jaw tense, his hands gripping the steering wheel with unnecessary force. Where are we going, my son? She finally asked, her voice low and uncertain. To a safe place, Mom. Away from her, Raphael replied without taking his eyes off the road. I have an apartment in Brooklyn. I bought it as an investment 2 years ago, but I never told Deborah. It was my plan B, I guess. Josephine felt a glimmer of hope. What happened? Why did you change your mind about the clinic? Raphael sighed deeply, like someone finally releasing an enormous weight. Mrs. Alice gave me your letter. At first, I didn't want to believe it. It seemed too absurd. But something told me to investigate before making any decision. The car stopped at a red light. Raphael finally looked at his mother, his eyes moist with contained emotion. I installed cameras in the apartment. Small, discreet. I wanted to prove that Deborah was right, that you were indeed confused, but what I saw... His voice faltered. Her throwing away your food, hiding your things, and then accusing you of losing them. She even turned on the gas intentionally when you were alone in the kitchen. My God! Josephine brought her hand to her mouth, horrified not by the confirmation of something she already knew, but by the pain she saw in her son's eyes. And then, today, while we were at her uncle's office, I received a notification on my phone. The living room camera captured Deborah on the phone with someone named Bruno. Raphael swallowed hard. She was laughing, talking about how she had manipulated everything to have you institutionalized, how I was a useful idiot, how she planned to take control of everything once you were out of the way. Josephine said nothing. There was no satisfaction in being right, only sadness for her son's disillusionment. I went back to the apartment determined to confront her, but when I saw her, with that fake smile, those empty eyes, I realized I didn't know her. Maybe I never did. Raphael took a deep breath. So I called you, packed some important things, and left before she realized what was happening. When I came back to pick you up, Deborah had already understood everything. The argument I heard? Yes. She was furious. She threatened to destroy my career, my reputation. She said she would prove that I was helping a dangerous madwoman escape treatment. A bitter smile crossed Raphael's lips. Little does she know I have everything recorded. The apartment in Brooklyn was smaller than the previous one, but infinitely more welcoming. Simple furniture, neutral colors, a small balcony with potted plants, a refuge Raphael had created far from Deborah's world of appearances. It's not much, but we can stay here while we decide the next step, he explained, placing his mother's suitcase in the guest room. Josephine looked at the place with affection. It's perfect, my son. That has your soul. Sitting in the small living room with cups of chamomile tea that Raphael clumsily prepared, mother and son finally talked sincerely, something they hadn't done in years. How could I have been so blind, Mum? How did I not realize what was happening? Love sometimes blinds us, my son, and Deborah knew exactly how to manipulate that love. Raphael lowered his head, ashamed. I always prided myself on being smart, on having gotten where I am by my own merit, but I was a complete idiot. No, you just trusted. You trusted someone who didn't deserve your trust. That's not stupidity, it's nobility of heart. Josephine's simple yet profound words were a balm for her devastated son. For the first time since she arrived in New York City, Raphael truly saw her, not as a fragile, confused old woman, but as the strong, wise woman she had always been. What do we do now? He asked, like a child seeking guidance. First, we need to protect you. Deborah is dangerous and now she's cornered. A cornered snake is more venomous. Raphael nodded, impressed by his mother's clarity of thought. I've already called a lawyer friend. He's going to prepare the divorce papers and a restraining order against Deborah based on the recordings. Good. As for the clinic, we need to ensure that Dr. Augustus cannot proceed with her plans. I've thought about that too. I have a friend, Dr. Paul Fisher, one of the most respected neurologists in New York City. We can consult him tomorrow, get an independent report. Josephine smiled, proud. My clever son is back. In the days that followed, Raphael and Josephine worked as a team. While he dealt with the legal aspects, the divorce, the protection of his assets, the evidence against Deborah, Josephine transformed the apartment into a true home. With her skilled hands, she arranged, cooked, created small personal touches that warmed the environment. The consultation with Dr. Paul Fisher was calm and professional. After extensive tests and detailed conversations, the doctor was categorical. Josephine was perfectly lucid, with an impressive memory for her age and no signs of dementia or any other cognitive disorder. In fact, the doctor commented as he signed the report, your mother has a clarity of thought that many young people would envy. Raphael smiled, finally free from the weight of doubt Deborah had planted in his heart. A week after fleeing the apartment, Raphael's lawyer, Mr. Henry Miller, brought important news. Deborah accepted the divorce without contestation, he announced, sitting in the living room of the new apartment. The evidence you collected is overwhelming. She knows she would lose much more if this went to trial. And the agreement? Raphael asked, tense. She keeps the apartment and the car. You keep your company shares, your personal savings, and, of course, this property. Mr. Miller adjusted his glasses. Considering what she planned to do, I'd say you came out ahead. After the lawyer left, Raphael and Josephine sat on the balcony, watching the sunset that painted the New York City sky with shades of orange and pink, colors that reminded them of the Appalachian foothills. "You know, Mom, I was thinking," Raphael began hesitantly. "About what, my son?" "Maybe we should go back to Blue Creek." Josephine looked at her son, surprised. "But what about your work, your life here? I can work from anywhere these days, and as for my life," he made a sweeping gesture, "I realize now that I built something empty, based on appearances, on impressing people who don't care about me. That's not what I want anymore." "And what do you want, my son?" Raphael smiled, a sincere smile Josephine hadn't seen in years. "Peace, authenticity, reconnection with my roots, and—" He took his mother's hands in his. "I want to make up for the time we lost. I want to learn everything you can still teach me." Silent tears streamed down Josephine's wrinkled face. They were not tears of sadness, but of deep gratitude for this moment of redemption. "But we have to be practical," Raphael continued. "Your little house there needs renovations. The land has been abandoned for months. With our 4 hands and a little time, we'll turn it into a paradise again," Josephine replied confidently. The next morning, while having coffee, Raphael received an unexpected call. His expression changed as he answered, becoming serious, concerned. "It was from the hospital," he said after hanging up. "Deborah had an accident." "My God, is she okay?" Josephine asked, genuinely concerned, for despite all she had suffered, she held no hatred in her heart. "Yes, nothing serious. She crashed her car coming back from a party. She has some fractures, but she'll recover." Raphael seemed thoughtful. No one visited her. Apparently neither her dear friends nor this Bruno showed up. "Loneliness is the worst punishment for those who live by appearances," Josephine wisely commented. "Perhaps we should visit her." Raphael looked at his mother, astonished. "After everything she did? You really suggest that?" "Not for her, my son. For us. Forgiveness frees the one who forgives, not the one who is forgiven." And so that same afternoon, Raphael and Josephine entered the hospital room where Deborah was recovering. The surprise on her face at seeing them was indescribable, a mixture of fear, confusion, and perhaps a pang of shame. "What do you want? Did you come to gloat over my misfortune?" Her voice tried to be as sharp as ever, but there was a new fragility there, amplified by the bruises on her face and her bandaged arm. "We came to see how you are," Raphael replied, keeping his distance, "and to bring something." Josephine approached the bed, taking a small package from her bag. "Cornmeal cake, the way my mother taught me and her mother before her. It's good for regaining strength." Deborah looked at the package as if it were something alien. "Why? Why would you do this after everything?" "Because hatred is too heavy a burden to carry," Josephine replied, placing the package on the nightstand. "And because I believe everyone deserves a second chance to find their way." Deborah didn't thank them, didn't smile, but her eyes, always so cold and calculating, welled up for a fleeting moment. As they left the hospital, Raphael put his arm around his mother's shoulders. "You're amazing, you know. I don't know if I could do that. Life taught me that holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die." Josephine smiled. "Besides, I have much more important things to focus on now, like teaching my engineer son to renovate our little house in the foothills." 2 weeks later, with legal matters resolved and bags packed, Raphael and Josephine boarded the bus that would take them back to Blue Creek. Raphael could have bought plane tickets or driven, but his mother insisted on the bus. She wanted to retrace the path in reverse, to see the landscape gradually transform, from concrete to the foothills, like a ritual of returning to their origins. Sitting by the window, Josephine watched New York City disappear behind them. She felt no regret, no bitterness. That city had not been kind to her, but it had given her back her son, not just physically, but in essence, in connection. "What are you thinking about, Mum?" Raphael asked, noticing her distant gaze. "About how life comes full circle, my son. I came to New York City fearing I would be a burden to you, and I ended up being your anchor in a storm." Raphael took his mother's hand in his. It was a small hand calloused by hard work, marked by time, but incredibly strong. "You never were, nor will you ever be a burden. You are my foundation, my compass." His voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I seemed to have given up on you." Josephine smiled, squeezing her son's hand. They didn't need more words. The bus headed east, and the horizon ahead promised a new beginning, not in the cold concrete of the big city, but in the warm, generous land of the foothills, where both had been born, and to where they now returned, not as refugees, but as pilgrims who had finally found their way back home. The bus arrived in Blue Creek at dusk. The Appalachian foothills sky displayed a spectacle that no New York City skyscraper could ever overshadow. A perfect gradient of blue, orange, and red, dotted with clouds that seemed hand-painted. Josephine took a deep breath as she got off the bus, smelling the familiar air, laden with the scent of earth, brush, and simple life. "We're home, my son," she said, squeezing Raphael's hand. The small bus station was almost empty at that hour. A few people recognized Mrs. Josephine and waved enthusiastically, surprised and happy to see her back. The taxi driver, Mr. Julian, refused to charge the fare when he learned he was taking Mrs. Josie back to her homestead. "You helped me when my Teresa had a difficult birth," he explained simply. "You don't charge family." On the way to the homestead, Raphael observed the landscape with renewed eyes, the gentle hills, the resilient countryside vegetation, the simple houses scattered across the horizon. All of this had once been a part of him, but had been gradually forgotten in the years of concrete and ambition. "It's more beautiful than I remembered," he confessed, feeling an unexpected emotion in his throat. "The foothills always wait for those who truly belong to it," Josephine replied wisely. The property, when they finally arrived, was in a state of controlled abandonment. The fences needed repairs, the brush had taken over the yard, the house walls needed a new whitewash, but the basic structure remained firm, as if resisting time on behalf of its rightful owners. Raphael carried the bags inside, while Josephine walked slowly around the land, reconnecting with every piece of that earth. She stopped in front of an old mango tree, which still bore some fruit on its highest branches. "This tree was planted when you were born," she told Raphael, who approached. "Your father used to say that you would grow together, strong and fruitful." Raphael hugged his mother by the shoulders, moved. And he was right. We both survived, even when it seemed impossible. Inside the house, simplicity was evident. Burnt cement floor, thick adobe walls, clay roof. But there was a solidity there, an authenticity that the luxurious apartments of New York City would never possess. "We'll need a lot of work to make this habitable again," Raphael commented, assessing the state of the rooms. "Work never killed anyone," Josephine replied, already taking old sheets from a cabinet. "On the contrary, it saves us from sadness and emptiness." The next morning they woke to the crowing of the rooster, a sound Raphael hadn't heard in over a decade. They had a simple breakfast on the porch, watching the sunrise, planning the improvements they would make to the property. "I'll hire a team of masons from the city," Raphael suggested, still thinking like a New York executive. Josephine smiled patiently. "It doesn't work that way here, my son. In the foothills, we work with a community work-bee system. One helps the other, and when you need it, you get help back." And so it was. Within days, the news that Mrs. Josie had returned with her engineer son spread throughout the municipality. Soon men and women began to appear, some bringing tools, others food, all offering hands to work. Mr. Anthony, the carpenter, brought his son and 3 nephews to help with the roof repairs. Mrs. Connie appeared with her daughters to clean the house and yard. Young Joaquin, whom Raphael no longer even remembered but who had grown up admiring, the boy who became a doctor in the capital, brought friends to rebuild the fences. Raphael, accustomed to delegating and supervising, now worked with his own hands. He felt blisters forming, unused muscles aching, his pale office skin slowly tanning under the foothills sun. And with every drop of sweat shed, something within him transformed, as if he were not only rebuilding the property, but himself. Josephine, in turn, reassumed her natural role in the community. Soon women came to her again for advice on medicinal herbs, on how to deal with difficult children, on old, almost forgotten recipes. Her knowledge, despised by Deborah as ignorant country bumpkin stuff, was valued there as ancestral wisdom. Evenings were filled with conversations on the porch, under a starry sky that no light pollution obscured. Raphael heard stories he had never heard, about his father, about the family's ancestors, about the very land where he had grown up. "Why did you never tell me these things before, Mom?" he asked one night, enchanted by a story about how his grandfather had found a spring during the worst drought the foothills had ever seen. "You never asked, my son, and I, out of respect, didn't want to impose my old stories on your modern life." The answer, simple and direct, hit Raphael like a revelation. How many times had he ignored his mother's wisdom, assuming she had nothing to teach an educated man like him? How many phone calls had he cut short, eager to return to reports and spreadsheets he believed were more important? As the weeks passed, the property gained new life. The house, now with freshly whitewashed walls and blue windows, gleamed under the sun. The yard, clean and reorganized, displayed beds of herbs and vegetables that Josephine cultivated with care. Raphael, using his engineering knowledge, implemented a simple rainwater harvesting system and planned to install solar panels. But the greatest transformation happened within them. Josephine, who had arrived in New York City downcast and fearful, now walked upright, her eyes bright, her laughter easy. Raphael, once always tense and focused on status and appearances, learned to value time, genuine relationships, work done with purpose. One particularly warm afternoon, as they rested in the shade of the mango tree after lunch, Raphael made a confession. "You know, Mom, I've been thinking a lot about Deborah." Josephine looked at her son with curiosity. "And what do you think, my son?" "That maybe I should thank her." Seeing the astonishment on his mother's face, Raphael continued, "Not for what she did, of course, but because without all that situation, I would never have realized how lost I was, how much I had strayed from what truly matters." "Life has these ironies," Josephine agreed. "From the worst situations can come the greatest lessons if we have an open heart to learn." "Do you think she'll ever change, find peace?" Josephine sighed, thoughtful. "I don't know, my son. Some need to fall very low before looking up. Others never learn. What I know is that the forgiveness we offered was sincere, and that's what matters to us." Raphael smiled, once again amazed by his mother's simple and profound wisdom. Over time, Raphael established a work routine that allowed him to continue his professional activities remotely, using the internet he had installed on the property. Some New York City companies continued to hire his consulting services, now carried out remotely. But his priorities had radically changed. One morning, while having coffee on the porch, Raphael made an announcement that surprised Josephine. "Mom, I've decided to start a project here in the region." "What kind of project, my son?" "A technical school for the young people here." His eyes shone with enthusiasm. "I realize that many young men and women have potential, but they end up leaving due to lack of opportunities. I want to change that." Josephine smiled, proud. "That's a wonderful idea. How do you plan to do it?" "I've already spoken with the mayor and some local business owners. I'll use part of my savings as initial investment, and I've secured some partners in New York City interested in supporting it." He paused, taking a sip of coffee. "It won't be a common school. We will teach technology, yes, but also value local knowledge, sustainable agriculture, traditional construction techniques, medicinal herbs." "Medicinal herbs?" Josephine raised her eyebrows, surprised. "Yes, Mum, and I want you to be one of the teachers." Raphael held his mother's hands affectionately. "That knowledge Deborah despised? It's valuable. It deserves to be preserved and transmitted." Silent tears streamed down Josephine's wrinkled face. She had never imagined that her knowledge, passed down through generations of foothills women, would one day be valued in this way. "It would be an honor, my son." In the following months, the school project took shape. A plot of land was acquired at the entrance to the town, plans were drawn, partnerships were established. Raphael used his contacts in New York City no longer to impress or climb the career ladder, but to bring concrete benefits to his homeland. The small town of Blue Creek began to see its prodigal son with new eyes. He was no longer just the boy who became a rich doctor, but someone who returned to give back, to share, to rebuild. One Sunday afternoon, as Raphael explained to some curious young people how the courses of the future school would work, Josephine watched her son with a heart overflowing with pride and gratitude. She remembered the skinny boy who had left years earlier, full of dreams and ambitions, and saw the upright and generous man he had become. "Mrs. Josie, you look happy," commented Mrs. Connie, who had sat beside her on the porch. "I am at peace, Connie, in deep peace." It was difficult, wasn't it? That whole story in New York City, news of the mistreatment Josephine had suffered had spread, as everything spreads in small towns. It was a storm, but look at the rainbow that came after. Josephine gestured towards her son, surrounded by attentive young people. Sometimes we need to lose something to gain much more. That night, after all the visitors had left, Raphael sat with his mother for the ritual that had become sacred to both of them, watching the sunset on the porch, drinking freshly brewed coffee. "Mom, I received an email today, from Deborah." Josephine looked at her son, surprised. And what did she want? Forgiveness, truly this time. Raphael seemed thoughtful. She said she's undergoing therapy, that she realized how empty and unhappy she was inside, despite all the appearances she maintained. "And do you believe her?" "I don't know, but I replied saying that we had already forgiven her a long time ago, and that I sincerely wish she finds peace." Josephine smiled, squeezing her son's hand. "You are a good man, Raphael. Your father would be proud." A comfortable silence settled between them, as the foothills sky was painted with impossible colors. In the distance, the church bell rang, announcing the novena mass. A gentle breeze brought the smell of wet earth and basil. "You know, Mom," Raphael finally said, "I never imagined I would find so much meaning by returning to my origins. I always thought success was about going beyond, about leaving all this behind. True success, my son, is being who you truly are, wherever you are." Josephine looked at the land that stretched ahead, land that her ancestors had cultivated for generations. Here or in New York City, the important thing is to keep your roots strong, even when your branches extend far away. Raphael nodded, finally understanding the profound wisdom contained in those simple words. It was not a matter of choosing between the foothills and the big city, between tradition and progress. It was about finding balance, honoring origins while embracing the future. As the stars began to dot the darkening sky, mother and son remained in contemplative silence. They didn't need words to express what they felt, a deep gratitude for the journey traveled, for the lessons learned, for the love that united them, and that despite all trials had resisted and grown stronger. And so under the starry sky of the Appalachian foothills, Josephine and Raphael celebrated not only a return to their origins, but a true rebirth of their relationship, of their values, and most importantly, of their souls. 2 years passed since Raphael and Josephine returned to Blue Creek. The Appalachian foothills, which follows its own rhythm, saw the seasons change. The rains come and go, the crops grow and bear fruit. The river's homestead, once abandoned and sad, now shone as an oasis of life and renewal. The house, completely renovated, maintained its traditional architecture, but had gained improvements that combined ancestral knowledge with modern technology. Raphael had installed solar panels that guaranteed clean and sustainable energy. The rainwater harvesting system supplied not only the house, but also irrigated the beds of medicinal herbs that Josephine cultivated with devotion. In the yard, free-range chickens scratched freely, while a small orchard of native fruits began to develop. The mango tree, planted when Raphael was born, remained majestic, its roots now deeper, its fruits sweeter, as if celebrating the sun's return to that land. But the biggest transformation had happened at the entrance to the town. There, where before there was only an empty lot, now stood the Sebastian Rivers Institute, the technical school Raphael had dreamed of and brought to fruition. A simple but functional building constructed with sustainable techniques and local materials that harmonized with the countryside landscape. On that sunny September morning, the institute buzzed with activity. It was graduation day for the first class. 25 young people from the region who had completed technical courses in areas such as agroecology, agricultural information technology, sustainable construction, and natural medicine. Raphael, dressed in a white linen shirt and simple pants, supervised the final preparations for the ceremony. He was nervous and emotional. That project represented much more than a professional endeavor. It was the materialization of his reconnection with his roots, of his redemption as a son of the foothills. "Is everything ready for the big celebration?" Josephine asked, approaching with a serene smile. At 73, she radiated a vitality that many young people would envy. "Almost everything, Mom. I'm just checking the last details." Raphael put his arm around his mother's shoulders. "You look beautiful today." Josephine wore a simple yet elegant dress, made by Mrs. Connie especially for the occasion. In her hair, now completely white, a discreet arrangement of foothills flowers. Her wrinkled face displayed a serenity that only years and wisdom can confer. "Your father would be so proud, my son." She looked at the sky, as if she could see Sebastian looking down at them from somewhere. "He always said that education was the greatest wealth we could leave behind." And he was right, as always. Raphael smiled, remembering his father, a simple man, without formal education, but endowed with a natural wisdom that only now, as an adult, he could truly appreciate. The graduation ceremony would be simple but meaningful. The entire community was involved. Mrs. Connie and other women had prepared a feast with typical regional foods. Mr. Anthony, the carpenter, had built a rustic but elegant stage. Even the mayor, initially skeptical of the project, now proudly attended to present the certificates. As people began to arrive, families of the graduates, town residents, representatives from universities and partner companies, Raphael felt a wave of gratitude. 2 years earlier, he was lost in an empty marriage, pursuing superficial success in New York City. Now, he had found true purpose and meaning. Among the special guests was Mrs. Alice, the housekeeper who had courageously delivered Josephine's letter to Raphael at that crucial moment in New York City. After the divorce, Raphael had invited her to work at the Institute, where she now coordinated the administrative area. "Mrs. Alice," Josephine hugged her affectionately, "so glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it for anything, Mrs. Josie." Alice smiled. "It's so good to see everything you've built here. Sometimes I think I was just a divine instrument in that whole story." "A crucial instrument," Raphael corrected, joining them. "Without your courage, we might still be trapped in that terrible situation." The ceremony began at noon. On the improvised stage, Raphael spoke briefly about the importance of valuing local knowledge while embracing innovation. He spoke about the need to create opportunities for young people to prosper in their own land, without having to migrate to large urban centers. "This institute is not just mine or my mother's," he concluded, moved. "It belongs to all of us. It is living proof that we can flourish where we are planted, as long as we have well-nourished roots and an open heart to grow." When the certificates were handed out, each young graduate walked onto the stage with visible pride. Many were the first in their families to obtain any kind of education beyond basic schooling. For them, that diploma represented not only acquired knowledge, but a possible future in the land they loved. Josephine, sitting in the front row, couldn't hold back her tears. She saw in each young face the promise of continuity, the guarantee that the traditional knowledge of the foothills, which had almost been lost, would now be preserved and valued by new generations. After the ceremony, the communal banquet turned into a true country party. A group of local banjo players strummed folk tunes while people ate, talked, and celebrated. Children ran among the adults. The elders told stories of other times. Young couples danced under the open sky. Amidst the celebration, Raphael received a notification on his cell phone, an important email. He moved away slightly to read it in private. "Something wrong, my son?" Josephine asked, noticing his surprised expression. "No, Mom. Actually, it's surprising news." Raphael showed her his phone. "Deborah is engaged." "Really?" Josephine raised her eyebrows, genuinely interested. "And who is the groom?" "A doctor. It seems they met when she was in therapy after our divorce." Raphael seemed thoughtful. "She says she's truly changed, that she found purpose working with an NGO that helps women victims of domestic violence. Suffering can be a great teacher when we have the humility to learn." Josephine smiled softly. "I sincerely hope she has found her way." "She also mentions you, Mom. She says she'd like to ask for your forgiveness in person someday." "The doors of forgiveness never close, my son." Josephine looked at the party around them, the sincere joy, the true simplicity. Perhaps one day she will understand that true wealth is not in what we possess, but in what we share. Raphael put his phone away, feeling a strange peace. The past with Deborah, which for so long had represented pain and disappointment, now seemed distant, almost as if it had happened in another life. There was no resentment, only the awareness that every step of that journey, even the most painful ones, had been necessary to get to where he was now. The sun was beginning to set when Raphael noticed an unfamiliar car approaching. A middle-aged man, wearing a suit and tie that seemed out of place in that environment, got out of the vehicle and looked around, as if searching for someone. "Mr. Raphael Rivers?" he asked, spotting Raphael. "Yes, that's me. My name is Martin Vance. I represent the Department of Education." The man offered his hand for a formal handshake. "We heard about the innovative work you are developing here and came to see it personally." Raphael led him through the institute, showing the classrooms, the simple but functional laboratories, the experimental garden where ancestral cultivation techniques were combined with modern sustainable practices. The department representative took notes, asked questions, showed genuine interest. "Impressive," he commented when they concluded the tour, "especially the natural medicine module, where your mother teaches, combining traditional knowledge with scientific validation." "It was our greatest innovation," Raphael explained, proud. "We realized that a treasure of knowledge was being lost with the passing of the community's elders. We decided to document, systematize, and validate this knowledge, and that's exactly why I'm here." The man opened his briefcase, taking out some documents. "The department is interested in replicating this model in other regions of the country. We would like to propose a partnership." The proposal was more ambitious than Raphael had ever imagined. The Sebastian Rivers Institute would be expanded, with federal funding, to become a reference center for sustainable rural education. The knowledge developed there would be systematized and shared with other regions of the United States with similar characteristics. "This means we could help other communities develop projects like this?" Raphael asked, enthusiastic. "Exactly. You would be the main consultants, sharing methodology and experience." When the representative left, promising to send official documents the following week, Raphael looked for Josephine, who was talking with a group of ladies in the shade of the large mango tree. "Mom, I have incredible news," he told her about the proposal, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "See, my son, when we do good with a pure heart, it multiplies beyond what we can imagine." Josephine smiled, an expression of deep serenity on her wrinkled face. The party continued late into the night, illuminated by lanterns and the glow of the stars, so visible there, far from the light pollution of big cities. Raphael watched the scene with a heart overflowing. The young graduates proud of their certificates, the elders sharing stories and wisdom, children running and laughing, promises of a future more connected with the land and its traditions. In a moment of quiet, he and Josephine walked to a small natural viewpoint from where they could see the entire property and, in the distance, the lights of the small town. "You know, Mom, I still wonder how I could have been so blind for so long." "What do you mean, my son?" "I spent years in New York City, believing I was building something important. I had a luxurious apartment, a wife everyone envied, a prestigious position, but it was all empty." Raphael took a deep breath, smelling the earth, the plants, the simple and true life. The true wealth was here all along. Josephine took her son's hand in hers, hands calloused by work, marked by time, but still incredibly strong. "Everyone has their own path, Raphael. You needed to go far to see what was near. You needed to get lost to truly find yourself. You always knew that, didn't you? Even when you suffered at Deborah's hands, even when I doubted your lucidity, you always knew that in the end, we would find our way back. Faith and love never abandoned me, my son. They are the only certainties I carry with me." A comfortable silence settled between them, not the oppressive silence Josephine had experienced in that cold apartment in New York City, but a silence full of meaning, of mutual understanding, of peace. Suddenly, a group of young people approached, carrying banjos and tambourines. "Mr. Raphael, Mrs. Josie, we came to invite you to the music circle." Raphael looked at his mother, who smiled and nodded. Together they returned to the party, where they were received with genuine affection and respect, not for appearance, not for status, but for who they truly were and for the good they did. In the music circle, one of the graduates, a talented young man who had studied information technology but kept the tradition of the banjo players alive, began to sing a folk tune composed especially for the occasion. It was the story of an old woman from the foothills who had faced the harshness of the big city, but returned stronger, bringing with her her lost son and the promise of a better future for her land. Josephine, moved, recognized her own journey in those simple but profound verses. Raphael by her side held her hand, equally touched. In the faces around them, they saw the reflection of their own story, not as something individual, but as part of a collective narrative of resilience, overcoming, and love for the land. When the music ended, warm applause echoed through the starry night. Raphael hugged his mother, feeling a gratitude that words could never express. For an instant it seemed to him that he saw among the stars the smiling face of his father. Sebastian, the simple man who had planted in him the seeds of integrity and work, and whose memory now inspired an entire generation. "We are blessed, aren't we, Mum?" Raphael whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Yes, my son. Very blessed," Josephine smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the stars and the wisdom of the years. "For having learned that true paradise is not a distant place, but the one we build with our own hands, our own sweat, and above all, with love." The party continued into the night, celebrating not only the graduation of the first class of the Institute, but something much larger and deeper. The reconciliation of a man with his origins, the redemption of a son before his mother, the silent triumph of wisdom over appearance, of truth over manipulation, of love over fear. And so, under the starry sky of the Appalachian foothills, amidst banjos and laughter, old songs and new dreams, Raphael and Josephine lived not a happy ending, but a continuous and authentic flourishing, like the mango tree planted at the boy's birth, whose roots now reached the depths of the red earth, and whose fruits nourished not only the body, but also the soul of all around them. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Mrs. Josephine and Raphael has touched your hearts. For more emotional American narratives like this, we have prepared a special playlist that explores the complexities of family relationships and the rediscovery of our roots. Find it by clicking the link on your left. If this story stirred emotions in you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that reveal the beauty and contradictions of the American soul. And have you ever experienced a transformative reunion with your origins? Tell us in the comments. Your story might inspire our next narrative.